morning, everyone. A lot of you know me or have seen me at other workshops in the past, over the past few years. For those of you who don't, my name is Art Mean, and I do work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a branch of the USDA, U.S. Federal Department of Agriculture. We have a local office where I worked for a number of years over in Douglas, or not too far from here. Currently, I work on a more area-wide basis. Kim caught me and told me I had to come over and do this as a follow-up to things. We are going to go outside in a little bit and actually calibrate a hand sprayer, which is something that for the chemical part of weed control is something that you need to know how to do. And it's kind of fun and not particularly difficult, but also wanted to touch very briefly on pesticide labels. I gave you two handouts here. The first one that starts with Spike 20P is just a selection of parts of labels that I'm going to touch on real briefly. The second one is the complete label for a product called Milestone, and we're going to use this to actually calibrate a sprayer. So first of all, pesticide labels, they're a legal document, and every single pesticide has one. And by law, federal law, certain kinds of information must appear on every pesticide label. And people who use pesticides, whether they're over-the-counter, restricted use, whatever, are legal responsibility to read, understand, and follow the label directions. More important than that sort of legal disclaimer, they have a great deal of necessary information on them for making use of the product successfully, and I'm going to just touch on a few things. As you can see with the Milestone label, they're often 8, 9, 10 pages long, 7, something like that. They're not just a half a page of information. So if you look at, start with this one here, and unfortunately I couldn't highlight the word. I'm usually pretty good at, I downloaded this from the internet, which all of these labels are available, and for some reason this particular Milestone label had a protection on it that I could not defeat. So I could not, in PDF form, Adobe, and I could not highlight it, and I couldn't do anything with it except print it out. So, but one important area on a label is the signal word, and its official definition as defined as the toxicity of a product from a single exposure. And so this refers to the amount of product it takes to be dangerous, and also to the type of reaction and damage. And on the Spike label, the word is right there. It's caution. And there are 3 levels of signal words. Caution. The products are slightly toxic or may cause slight, in most cases, eye or skin irritation. Warning is the next level up. Products are moderately toxic or can cause moderate eye or skin irritation. Danger without a red skull and crossbones, which says products are corrosive and can cause irreversible eye damage or severe skin injury. You see how we're escalating up. And then there's a subcategory, or a 4th category, if you will, that says danger poison. And that's always in red, not in black. You'll see an example of it a little farther on. Along with the skull and crossbones, kind of get the idea. Products are highly toxic and potentially deadly at very low doses. Not something that most people will work with, but they're out there. Label also tells you the type of pesticide. Is it a herbicide, an insecticide, a fungicide, a rodenticide, etc.? Which brings me to a question. Anybody here think that things like gopher bait and mouse pellets are not pesticides? Because they are. The gopher bait, mouse pellets, those kinds of things, ant baits, ant traps, roach motels, all of those kinds of things officially fall under the classification of pesticides. Their labels don't tend to be 7 pages long, but they have the same required information somewhere on them, usually in a font size so small that anymore I can't even read it. Anything below about a font 6 and forget it. Give me my magnifying glass, I cannot read it. I see a couple of knowing nods in here. Yeah. Anyway, label also tells you whether or not it's restricted use. Restricted use pesticides are not available to the general public. There are several reasons for this restrictions. Two of them are the potential for hazard to human health and the potential for environmental hazard, even when the products are used according to the label. A couple of examples briefly in here. Milestone is not restricted use, which is one reason why it is being recommended for treatment of certain of these noxious weeds. The other reason is it's very, very effective. So also, as you might expect, safety and first aid. The type of personal protective equipment, you'll see it as an acronym, PPE, in capitals all through these labels. And the treatment for accidental exposure to eyes, skin, etc. And then on the label, another major part, and the last one I'm going to spend any time on, is uses of the product and use restrictions. Susceptible species and amounts to use, including the maximum amounts allowed and the minimum amounts recommended. How and when to use a pesticide for best results, and how, where, and when not to use a product. All of that stuff you'll find on these labels. So let's look at a couple of examples. I picked this first one because several of you will recognize the name. Spike, or Spike 20P, also known as Tebutyron. It's a rangeland herbicide. As I said, several of you may be well familiar with. And it's it comes in pellet form. So I've given you a couple of the pages of a 7-page label. The first one is the signal word, caution. When you look at the safety part of this, common sense comes in. Don't get it on your skin, avoid the pellet dust. Do that, you're pretty much okay at the caution level. That's not what it says on the label. The label will give you a half a page of information, but that's what it boils down to, common sense. And then the second page of this handout, bottom of column 1 and the top of column 2, gives you some of the uses and the woody plants controlled. And I picked this one because of some of the species listed that, again, are very, very common in a lot of these areas. Creosote bush, tar bush, and whitethorn. Those are 3 plants that grow together on certain limy soils in this area and all across southeastern Arizona. And this herbicide is very effective when used properly at controlling, reducing those species in rangeland situations. And I didn't include it in here, but if you bother to read all of this, this is a very common question, is, what does this herbicide do for mesquite? The answer is 0. Forget it. The label will tell you that. The label will tell you in more official language, don't bother. Look at what it will control and work there. Otherwise, forget it. It only does certain stuff. So let's move on to another one. The next one, which is Telone, or Telone 2. This is a soil fumigant, and it tells you that. It's a soil fumigant right there. Multi-purpose liquid fumigant, pre-plant treatment of soil to control plant parasitic nematodes, symphyllins, etc., etc. Signal word is warning, a notch up from caution. Be a little more careful with it. It's also a restricted use pesticide, or you won't be able to go and buy this unless you have your certification that you can purchase and apply when it comes to fumigants. This type of thing. And there's a fair bit of studying involved. And a couple of reasons for that is, this stuff is a liquid that when you stick it in the soil, it turns into a gas, which means that if you don't seal the soil, you don't handle it properly, it's got all the potential in the world to volatilize, go up into the air, go wherever the wind takes it, and cause all kinds of trouble, not least of which is to people if they happen to be breathing it. Why it's restricted use. It's a great product for certain things in commercial agricultural situations as a soil fumigant, but it's not to be used carelessly. You'll also notice if you look at this, the section on personal protective equipment is very long and very detailed. I'm not going to spend any time on that. We're certainly not going to use it today, and the chances of you having any involvement with it are almost none. But there's a lot of information there on what you got to wear or what you should be wearing, including respirators and all of that kind of stuff. This stuff is not to be trifled with. And finally, the last one, before we get on to milestone itself, Telone. Only it's not Telone 2, it's Telone C35. So a question, is this the same project or product with the same language on the label, just a slightly different name? No, it is not. It is also a restricted use pesticide, only this time it's got danger, poison, skull and crossbones, and the word poison in red. And the reason for that is it's got the same active ingredient as the original, as the other Telone 2, plus another one. This one has 2 active ingredients, puts it into yet another category of stuff. And I think that's all the time I'll spend on those. I'm just using those to give you some examples. Labels, again, labels are important, and they take a while to read. But if you're working with a product that you're not familiar with, take the time to read the label and read all of the parts and get an idea of how to use it, how not to use it, what to use it on, when to use it, all of that kind of stuff.